I hope you feel like I do. Very excited about the prospects for November the 30th. I hope you also feel like I do, a bit tired. Because we're working hard, aren't we? We have to work hard right up until the day of that strike. I want to start by telling you about a fantastic meeting I was at yesterday at the Institute of Education, which is a teacher training facility in London. A meeting of 100 students about to become teachers and their lecturers. And that meeting was fantastic, because it was people who aren't in a pension scheme, who realise the effect that these changes are going to have on them, wanting to talk about how they can be involved in the action on November the 30th. It was fantastic, because there were questions coming up that we could answer, because we were in a discussion with people. People wanted to know, how do you do it? I've never been on strike before. What is a picket line? What does that mean? And the fact that we're meeting with them means that we can deal with those questions. The thing that's keeping me awake at night at the moment, and there are lots of other things that we have to talk about, what's next after November the 30th. Is there going to be a deal that's an unfair deal? All those sorts of things are a worry. But the thing that's keeping me awake most at the moment is, will we have answered every question by an unconvinced or unconfident worker? Will we have found every activist, every potential activist, and turned them into somebody who's fighting for the strike? Will we make the strike as big as we possibly can? I think we should all be not worrying, but thinking that through. This is a fantastic meeting, more than 1,000 people in the room. Do each of us now go away? This is what we have to happen. Everybody goes away with a plan of action for the 20th, that's tomorrow, and the 21st, the 22nd, the 23rd, right up to the 29th, and on the 30th, we all need a plan of action. I've been really impressed by some of the contributions. Jess from Lambeth NUT said the same thing about needing to deal with the detail. Caroline from the Unison branch in Birmingham, just talking through, and Anne Drinkle, talking through the detail of how do we find these small groups of workers? How do we connect with them? Before the meeting started, I was talking to an old friend of mine, John Lockwood, who's talked about going into a hospital last week with no invitation, finding this union office, then talking to the union officers there, taking some energy into the situation. People were already working on it, but all of us, retired, working, students, we've all got a huge job to do between now and the 30th. There should be no complacency. I'll tell you what, really, in the run-up to June the 30th, in the NUT, we got a fantastic ballot result, and we got lots of reps engaged with the process. What scares me just a little bit about the fantastic prospects of November the 30th is that people can think it's not their responsibility. Somebody else is doing the job. Dave Prentice is doing the job. Unite's doing the job. It's a huge strike. I don't have a responsibility as a rep in my workplace. Well, every rep has a huge responsibility. The strike will be bigger if we work harder. On June 30th, the demonstration in London was that it was younger, more female and blacker than our activist layer. This is the rebirth of our movement. If we treat it seriously, if we look for these people, if we find the fighters and bring them into our movement, it's a real chance for a huge step change, a huge growth in our ability to fight. And I think that means that I am going to say something about the detail of the pensions fight, because in those conversations that we're going to have with people across the next few days, people are going to ask, what's the strike about? So I know people in this hall hopefully know these arguments, but we just have to be able to repeat to people quickly that it's pay more, work longer and get less. We have to be able to know that paying more is paying 50% more. That for many people that will mean them not being able to afford it. They don't have the disposable income. Many people leaving the pension schemes. So this pay more by itself is a huge attack on pensions. And the working longer, we have to know that their intention is that any worker in the public service who is 34 or under will have to work to the age of 68 to get a full pension. And you have to know that that's not the end of it. They don't say it's 68. They say it's a link to the state retirement age, and that the state retirement age is going to be flexible. So if you Google it, you can find reputable accountancy firms suggesting that the people who are 26 now, the retirement age by the time they get to retirement could be 70, 72. You can find places where people are suggesting it might be 74 by the time a 24-year-old reaches retirement. So they had this huge attack. Pay more, work till 68, at least 68 if you're 34 or under, and then this iniquitous change in the indexation to get less, which steals 15% of people's pensions. I know that you know those arguments, but does everyone in every workplace, have they heard the attacks that are coming? And we also have to deal with what they say from their side about the reason why they're doing this, because people will obviously understand these attacks are huge, but we have to be able to tackle the arguments that they put forward. So this first argument that they use, that it's unfair that public sector workers get a better pension than private sector workers. We've heard the fantastic speech from the Sparks with, you know, the comment that private sector workers see through this already, and I think that's true. And I think public sector workers see through it as well. And that's his real argument. Drive down the public sector wages, make it worse for everyone. And you see the truth of that in the remit that they gave to Lord Hutton to write his report on attacking public sector pensions. They asked Lord Hutton to compare these. They said to Lord Hutton, you have to look at the disparity between public sector and private sector pensions. They told him he had to look at that. Then they said in the rubric of the report, he's not allowed to make any recommendations about private sector pensions. So you see, it's completely crocodile tears on the Tories' part. They do not care about private sector workers' pensions at all. My father was a lorry driver with British Airways. He's now been retired for some time, and good luck on him. He intends to live at least long enough to take as much money out of the pension schemes he put into it. That's his aim in life. But they are changing his pension scheme to CPI as well. So the attack on public sector workers already moved into an attack on private sector workers. And their second bogus argument that we can't afford it. It is absolutely untrue at any level. For anybody with any ounce of gumption who sees the change in GDP that's happened across the last 100 years, the idea that a society where we are more capable of living longer, the idea that we can't afford pensions is ridiculous. But even on the narrow level, if you look inside Lord Hutton's report, there is no hint that public sector pensions are out of control. There are graphs that show that the cost of public sector pensions are falling as a part of GDP. They are falling, they are not out of control. We've got another figure that we're launching from the NUT that we put out for the first time yesterday, which also is a way of dealing with this affordability. We've looked, this is about the teachers' pension scheme, but it would be generalisable. We've looked back in the accounts of the teachers' pension scheme back to 1923 when it started, and we've counted up all the money that's been paid in to the teachers' pension scheme and all the money that's been paid out across that time. And what we've discovered, uprating it by the correct method to GDP, to current spending, what we've discovered is that there is an imbalance. And more money has been paid in than been paid out. And the scale of that imbalance is something that every worker should know about. More money paid into the teachers' pension scheme since it started, to the tune of £46,000 million. £46 billion more paid into the teachers' pension scheme than paid out since 1923. When they say it's unaffordable, they are taking a class position that says that they want more wealth in the hands of the rich and not of the poor. And in that situation, when the attacks are enormous and they are absolutely unjustified, at that time it's right to take action, it's right to strike. That's why we were right to strike on June the 30th. It's why we're right to strike again on November the 30th. We have to stay in touch with what members think about these things. So we've put the offer that Danny Alexander has put out, this three-part offer of some divide and rule protection for some people of more than 50, this fake bit of promise of just 30 seconds, a fake bit of promise on the 25-year guarantee. We've put that to our members. We've had 6,000 responses in the last 5 days about this. 98% say the government has not gone far enough to settle the dispute. That's why we're on strike on November the 30th, and that's why we're saying to the movement, if the government do not move, the decision of the National Executive of the NUT yesterday, on Thursday, if the government does not move, if we do not get an acceptable settlement, acceptable to our National Executive, to our members, if there isn't an acceptable settlement, we're saying in the movement now, we want a debate. We're taking to the TUC General Council and the PSLG the same sort of proposals that Mark Sawatka put forward. Further strike action. We're saying rolling strike action and more national strike action early in the new year, next term. A huge strike on November the 30th. Build it in everything we've got. More action if they don't give in.